Hey everyone, welcome back. So in this tutorial, we are going to be downloading everything. So we're going to be downloading and installing Git, GitHub Desktop, and setting up our repository on GitHub itself. So if you're not overly familiar with Git and you haven't watched the previous videos, I would suggest that you do that first, because I'm not going to spend that much time in this one explaining everything and how all of these elements fit together. There might be a little bit of repetition of what we went over in those previous videos, but yeah, I'm not going to go into as much detail as before. So let's get started. So I'm going to start off with Git, and remember, Git is the actual version control system that we're downloading. It's not the interface, it's not the repository itself, it's just the system that will track all of our changes. So let's just go download Git. It should just be the first link here. And as you can see, you can read about Git and look up the documentation and everything from here. It has tutorials as well. These are really great and really well explained, I think. So if you do have any trouble with anything, this is a great reference. But yeah, we just want to download it. So I'm going to download the Windows version. Awesome. And I'm just going to wait for that to download. Amazing. And now we can open that up. So we can pretty much leave these as the defaults. So I'm not going to unclick any of these. I think I'll just leave them all there. Make sure that you do get Git Bash, and there is an alternative Git GUI interface that actually we don't really need that one because we're going to be downloading our own, but I'm not going to touch anything. But Git Bash is the console that we will use a bit later. So make sure you include that one. Yeah, and I think we can just click through these. Actually, there is an interesting change being made to a lot of version control systems adopting main instead of master. And as you can see, the Git project intends to change this default to a more inclusive name such as main in the future. I'm going to do that. I'm just going to say main, and we can let that install. All right, awesome. And let's just open Git Bash. And I don't want to view the release notes, just to show you what this little terminal looks like. So technically, you don't need anything else to just start using Git, start using version control on some files, tracking some changes just on your local machine. And then of course that wouldn't be connected to any kind of cloud based repository or anything. This would just all be local, but you can track changes locally, and you can just use the command line. We're not going to be doing that. We're going to actually download a GUI. And actually, we can see right here some of the most popular GUIs that are used for Git. So I haven't used all of these. I've only used a couple, but you can see there's plenty to choose from. I will highlight GitHub Desktop. That's the one that we're going to be using because I think out of everything that I've tried, this is the most simple. We're going to go ahead actually and go directly to GitHub Desktop. And I'm going to hit download. Another great thing about this is that, so unlike SourceTree, unlike I think a lot of the other ones, you don't need to sign up for anything else. We're going to be using GitHub, and we can just use our GitHub accounts to log in and use this. Similar thing with SourceTree and Bitbucket. So I'm going to hit download, and I will let that download. All right, and we can open that up. So at this point, I'll remind you that I haven't actually set up an account for our Curious Rocketeer. So I still need to do that. I need to create a new free account for GitHub. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I also haven't configured any of the Git stuff. We've just basically installed Git. Okay, so our name, Curious Rocketeer. All right. Ooh, how fitting for us. The Spiral Galaxy. Okay. Cool, so now we have an account. And we can go ahead and sign in. Cool, so we just need to verify our account. Great. Okay. Okie dokie, verify our email. All done. And we should be logged into GitHub now. So we can actually make repositories for our project, basically a place to host it from within GitHub itself, or we can do it from our machine and then kind of push it into a repository. I think for me, it's simplest to do it in the latter way, to kind of make the project first, set it up on our local machine, and then kind of push it off. But yeah, you can do it. You can do it either way. You can have a look at that if you like. It's having some trouble. There we go. All right, so now we just need to kind of link our local machine to GitHub. So I'm going to hit authorize desktop. Sure, let's do that. All right, I'm going to put my actual email. So you might see in other tutorials that we configure Git from the command line, that little console that we had popping up earlier. And you totally can do that. So you can use console commands to set up your name and email. That's usually one of the first things that you do. But as you can see, you get to kind of do it all in a nice UI, which is why I like to propose this as a nice one for beginners, because yeah, it's just nice and easy. So there we go. That's all done for us. We can hit finish. Lovely. And yeah, we're good to go now. We have everything that we need to start using source control on our GameMaker projects. We've downloaded Git, which, remember, that is just the source control system, the stuff that actually does the work for us. And we have set up a place to actually put our project. And remember, that's what GitHub does, or that's what Bitbucket does. It's just the place that we put it. All right, so now we are actually going to dive into GameMaker and start making our repository. Now, there are a few different ways to do this. You can do it from the command line. And in some ways, that can be a quicker process, but you would have to use the command line. And I'm going to try to avoid that when I can, because it is totally doable from within here. Annoyingly, when we create a new repository, it actually necessarily creates a folder for us, which can be annoying because when we have a GameMaker project, that is also kept in a folder, usually in our documents folder in here. You'll have something like, let's say, really cool game, and then within there, that would actually be your project. So GitHub Desktop is going to create a folder for us, which would mean, for example, that let's just say like our new repository. We would then have to drag the contents into here, or we could copy and paste everything within here into that one. So I just want to point that out before we go ahead and do this so you don't get confused why I'm doubling up on different projects. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. So I'm going to assume that you already have a project. So we're going to do it that way around. If we were creating something new, it might be a little bit simpler because we could just save it inside the project repository that we are about to create. But I'm going to assume that you already have a project and you're trying to move it over to source control. So I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to say really cool, let's call it Rocketeer, surfing. I don't know how that game would work, but whatever. So now we have a new project. If we come back to find it in our actual GameMaker Studio 2 folder, so for me it's in Documents, GameMaker Studio 2. There it is, there's the project. And now if we try to make our repository, so this does not need to match the name. And in fact, it might be less confusing if it doesn't. So you can rename this later, of course, but let's get this right. So let's call it Rocket Surfing. Maybe I don't want the tier on the end, so I'm going to call this Rocket Surfing. I can add a description. A game about surfing on rockets. Cool. Now, I can initialize this repository with a README, and you might be wondering, what on earth is that? So, let's open up a random GitHub project. So if I go to Explore, and actually let's go to the Rust language. And right here, so this is just another programming language, and we can have a look here. And you can see everything that is involved with the Rust language project on GitHub. And if we scroll down, here is the README. And I know this looks a little bit scary, but we can just ignore most of that for now. But whatever, it's just a file, a markdown file that is kept in your project and will appear on a lot of these hosting websites down the bottom of the repository as a kind of description and about the project, maybe how to install it. how to use it, that kind of thing. So if you wanted to make that, or especially if you were making an open source game where other users could contribute to the project, you might want to put important information here. But otherwise, if this is a solo private project that you're working on, you don't need that really. It might be fun to just put a few things about the game, but it's not something you need. So I am not going to do that. Now, the git ignore is if we wanted to ignore files. So normally, when we actually set Git to watch everything in our project, it will watch anything that we add to this. It won't ignore anything. So sprites, music, if you accidentally drag something into your project, it's gonna track that change from then on. And you might wonder, why would I want to ignore anything? But there are cases where that is true. So maybe not in GameMaker, but although it might come up, to be honest. But if you think about config files, so that might be user specific. So for example, if something to do with the project required me to set a path that was different on someone else's computer, so it's on my C drive and it's on, Curious Rocketeer's D drive, I don't want that to be included in GitHub, because every time I would commit something and then Curious Rocketeer tries to pull in that change, it's going to overwrite their change and it's going to point them to the wrong folder, and we're going to have this back and forth battle that is happening, and we might not want to do that, so we might want to set Git to ignore that file. Same thing goes if we have an extremely large file, maybe a movie or a video rather file that is extremely big, and it's slowing down our commits, it's slowing down, it's making the project file really large or something, then we might want to ignore it. But really, you don't need to think about that unless your project is very, very big and has a lot, and you're starting to have troubles like that. So I wouldn't worry about that. Keep it as none. Okay, license, same thing. If you're an open source project, you might want to have a look at that. But if you're just a private repository, not something you're going to have to worry about. Okay, so we are ready to create the repository. So it is making now that repository on my computer. And so remember, it's not actually the GameMaker one. Like I said, it has made a new folder. Stuff that I add to this file will be tracked here. Now, that is only for my local machine. This is an important point. At this point, it does not exist online. If I went to my repositories, I think here, there's nothing here. Because I haven't published that yet. I haven't pushed that off to anything. So I do need to hit Publish Repository. Again, it's just giving me the opportunity to change this. I'm not going to. I'm going to keep it as that. This, I want to keep it as a private repository. And I am set to publish it. Okay. So now if I reload this, there we go. We have a private repository here. So if we click on that, as you can see, I don't have a README, so nothing is popping up here. But there's my description, and there is the only thing that we're tracking. Because that's the only file in here. So like I said, we could copy this entire project over, but that would include this kind of base project folder, which, I don't know, you might care about that you're nesting a folder inside of a folder and it's a bit annoying. It annoys me, so I'm going to copy the contents of this over. But before I do that, I'm going to close this. Okay, so I am going to highlight everything. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to come back and I'm going to put it in our repository. Okay, and I'm going to paste it here. So, oops, if I open this back up, you can see that I have now made a bunch of changes that Git is tracking. I've added all of these files. Don't worry about these at the moment, what these actually are, but you can see a bunch of option files, a YYP. We're going to be talking about that in another video, what that actually is, and some common folders, and what the resources actually are, and what all this stuff means as we're actually going about making our project. But I'm not going to do that for now because it will add a bit of complexity. The important thing is just that the changes are coming up here. So I'm swapping between the history and the changes tabs right here. History will show us the entire history of all the commits that have been made on our project. There's just one at the moment, the initial commit that Git made for us when it initialized the Git repository. we haven't done anything else at the moment. But we are getting all of these changed files. We can select only a few of them. I think we can actually commit just a few of them. I don't think I've ever done that though. Generally, if I'm changing stuff, I do it all at once. Yeah, and you can see by the green color that these are additions. Later, we might see some red deletions. But yeah, at the moment, they're all additions. And just to get acquainted with the rest of this interface, now that we actually have stuff popping up, this is our repository. If I had other ones on my account, they would also pop up here and we can swap between them. We have our branch. So we haven't talked about branches yet, and I'm going to leave that actually for another video, again, because it's just going to complicate things. We're going to just assume that we're working off one branch at the moment. Remember, there's just that main branch. But yeah, you can think of them like trees. You can actually have other branches that you can be working on at once, kind of like different versions of the project, I suppose. But yeah, we're going to ignore that for now. And we also have this button right here. If someone had made changes to the project online and I wanted to kind of grab those and pull them in, it's called pulling in someone else's commits, that would be popping up here. But there aren't any changes at the moment. And basically fetching the origin would be refreshing that. And it refreshes periodically without me clicking on it. So I think it might be every minute or every few minutes or so. It'll fetch the origin and kind of refresh it, and then I'm alerted that I have to pull in stuff before I can make my changes. If it's just you working, especially on one computer, that will never come up. There won't be anyone else making changes to this, and you'll never have to worry about stuff like that. But anyway, back to the actual project. We have to actually commit these changes that we've made. We've added all this stuff. So let's call this, copied over all files. So this is what is going to appear in the history as kind of like the heading of that commit. And you can add more of a description of stuff that you've done, like I could enumerate all these changes, like copied options, copied YYP, copied room 1. That's a bit silly for this commit, but you can totally do that if you wanted to stay a little bit more organized. But that's all we have to do. So note that it says commit to main, our main branch. If we were on a different branch, it would say something else. And this little thing here is we can actually co-author files. So if I had another person on this project, friendly COSMONAUT, although I am not currently a user on this project, so I can't do that. But yeah, we can co-author stuff, and then both of our names will be coming up here. Okay, so I'm going to hit commit. All right. Now, if I go ahead and reload this, well, for one, actually, we can't really see the commit history at the moment. We're still just kind of on the project. But if we come to here, and it's a little bit hard to find that, but it's here. One commit, we can actually see all of the commits. So we are currently on the main branch. Cool, you can see that we've got one branch, and we are going to view all the commits for that branch. Well, that's the only one. It only has our initial commit. So it doesn't have, if we click over here to history, our commit that we just made. So why is this? And this is crucial to remember, because I think when you're starting this off, it's easily forgotten that there are currently 2 copies of your project in existence. There's this one, the one online, the one that's being kept in the cloud, hosted on GitHub for you, and there's your local copy. And they're not the same. There are completely different copies of the same project. It's not one project that you're working off of. They are copies. And we are kind of keeping them up to date with each other. Copying over changes, kind of. Or applying changes, which might be additions or deletions. But yeah, they are copies, not the same thing. We talked about earlier why that has advantages over some of the other types of source control and some of the disadvantages. But remember, it's a copy. Which means that if we haven't pushed off our changes, then this version isn't up to date with my local version. Other people can't access it right now. You can make any number of commits before actually pushing it off to your remote, it's called, the remote version, the online one. As long as you don't push it off, you're actually kind of safe, because you can still undo changes. If you've completely stuffed something up, you still can roll back, and it's not going to be recorded on the remote, on the main thing. But again, that rolling back stuff, dealing with conflicts, it's probably something that we're going to touch on later or in another video. Right now, we want to push off our changes to the remote. Okay, so we're going to hit push. Cool. And if I refresh that, there we go. Despite only just having pressed push, it's keeping a record of when we actually committed the file, which was 3 minutes ago. Now, let's reopen GameMaker. And now remember that we actually moved over all of our files, so GameMaker probably doesn't know where to find this anymore. So remember, our actual project was called this, which is now an empty file. I'm going to delete that before GameMaker opens because it's not going to be a valid project anyway, but that's fine. We can just hit open and we can just tell it where the project is. So there it is, Rocketeer surfing, and we can hit open. Now we are all up to date. All right, so now that we have everything set up, we might leave it there for now. In the next tutorial, we are going to be going over some of the basic Git commands and what your workflow might look like. So I'll catch you in the next one.